In 2018, France won the World Cup, and in winning the World Cup, everybody was celebrating, and it made headlines because a majority of the players on the French team are of African descent, though they're French citizens. And there were a lot of memes that were doing around on social media. People were having a field day with France saying Africa has won the World Cup. The French team is the African Union. And, comedian Trevor Noah took it up and made a couple of jokes about it. But the French ambassador and France was not happy in general. And they took it upon themselves to respond to Trevor Noah. Now, before we get to the response that they sent to Trevor Noah, it's important to note that these are facts that are out there, right? Majority of the players on the team, their parents hail from Africa, more specifically West Africa, and they were immigrants. They moved to France, but this is the first generation. It's technically their parents are from West Africa and other parts of Africa. Either they were born in France or their parents went with them to France when they were young. Some of these guys also just left the continent where they were teenagers and went to France to pursue their dreams as footballers. So it's not like 5 generations, it's the first generation. Okay, and these guys are not people who've denounced their Africanness. These are people that they're very black. You cannot mistake them for not being Africans. They are, when you see them, you just know that these are technically Africans. And so nobody was saying that they're not French. If anything, the whole continent was rooting for these guys to go and, win the World Cup because it would mean a lot, not just for the continent, but also they weren't supporting Africa. They were proud of the Africans on the team who were playing for France, but we were supporting France as the team that had people of African descent. But that message did not get to the French embassy at all because this was the response that the French ambassador sent to Trevor Noah.
I watched with great attention your July 17th show when you spoke of the victory of the French team at the 2018 FIFA World Cup Russia final, which took place last Sunday. I heard your words about an African victory. Nothing could be less true. Now, first of all, I think it could have been less. I could have said they were Scandinavian. That would have been less true. That would have been less true. He says, as many of the players have already stated themselves, their parents may have come from another country, but the great majority of them, all but 2 out of 23, were born in France. They were educated in France. They learned to play soccer in France. They are French citizens. They are proud of their country, France. The rich and various backgrounds of these players is a reflection of France's diversity. France is indeed, now that line there was interesting, the rich and various backgrounds of these players is a reflection of France's diversity. Now, I'm not trying to be an asshole, but I think it's more a reflection of France's colonialism. Because it's not like it's just like random play, like they all have something in common. Like all of those players, if you trace their lineage, you're like, how did you guys become French? Like, how did your family start speaking French? Oh, okay, all right. And they say here, he says, France is indeed a cosmopolitan country, but every citizen is part of the French identity, and together they belong to the nation of France. Unlike in the United States of America, France does not refer to its citizens based on their race, religion, or origin. To us, there is no hyphenated identity. Roots are an individual reality. By calling them an African team, it seems you are denying their Frenchness. This, even in jest, legitimizes the ideology which claims whiteness as the only definition of being French.
The most interesting thing about this whole conversation is nobody was denying that these people are not French. Nobody at all. We were supporting France at the World Cup. Nobody said it wasn't an African team. Nobody said, oh, the African Union is playing. These are just memes on the internet, a coping mechanism. Everybody was supporting France, but it's like, if you're French, you can't be any other thing. It's like, either you're French or you go back to where you came from, and you have to almost be exceptional, to be allowed to be French, because at the end of the day, they will not hesitate to remind these guys that they're immigrants. And so what was very interesting is the fact that the French embassy and the ambassador were trying to disassociate these guys from who they are, from who their parents are, from where they came from. Just because they've lived in France for a couple of years, played the World Cup and won the World Cup, they are exclusively French and cannot celebrate their African heritage. They cannot celebrate the fact that they're from Africa. And Africans have no right to celebrate that these players came from the continent. I'll tell you one thing that I find very fascinating with some of these Western countries. When you're exceptional in their country, it's almost like they want to own you. Yeah, you're good, you're a good black French citizen. You're French when you're excelling. When you're not excelling, then you can't be French. You're an immigrant. You're African. Look at what these people are doing on our continent. And that's the same thing that Trevor Noah raises and says, at least in America, you're allowed to be several things. You're allowed to be yourself. You're allowed to be who you were, but still be a part of America. It's like in France, that is not allowed. There's no room for that. And only exceptional immigrants can be French people and French exclusively. If you're not, then you're just an immigrant or you're an African.
I understand what he's saying, because I read up on this afterwards, right? I take criticism. I'll listen to what somebody says to me. I genuinely believe you should. And what it turns out is, in France, a lot of like Nazis in that country use the fact that these players are of African descent to shit on their Frenchness, So they go, you're not French. You're from Africa. Go back to where you came from. You're not French. They use that as a line of attack. Now, my opinion is, coming from South Africa, coming from Africa, and even watching the World Cup in the United States of America, Black people all over the world were celebrating the Africanness of the French players, right? Not in a negative way, but rather in a positive way, going, look at these Africans who can become French. You know what I mean? It's a celebration of that achievement. And so this is what I find weird in these arguments, is that people go, they're not African, they're French. Then I'm like, why can't they be both? Right? Why is that duality only afforded to a select group of people? Why can they not be African? So what they're arguing here is, in order to be French, you have to erase everything that is African? Because what do they mean when they say that? Our culture, our this, like, so you cannot be French and African at the same time, which I vehemently disagree with. I go, you've seen those players, I love them. Paul Pogba, N'Golo Kante, I've watched all of them. Like, I love those players, and I love how African they are and how French they are. I don't take their Frenchness away, but I also don't think you need to take their Africanness away, And that is what I love about America. America's not a perfect country, but what I love about this place is that people can still celebrate their identity in their Americanness. You can go to a St. Patrick's Day parade in America celebrating that you are Irish. You can go to a Puerto Rican Day parade in America still celebrating the fact that you're Puerto Rican and American at the same time. You can celebrate Juneteenth as a black person and be like, yo, I'm African American, which is the duality of the two worlds. But here they're going, no, you are only French.
This is nothing new. It happens a lot, even when England plays, when Rashford and all the other colored boys score, then, hey, England. When they missed the penalties, they were being racially abused. So all this while, when they were scoring goals and winning and ensuring that England progresses and gets to higher levels at competitive football, they're English. And then when a mistake happens in the field, and not technically a mistake, it's football. There are days you win, there are days you don't win, there are days the other team is better tactically than you, and there's nothing that you can do about it. You put your all in the field. Then the Africans, and this is nothing new, there's this double standard in the West where if you're an immigrant, we're going to open our door for you for as long as you succeed and you don't toe the line. The moment you color outside of the lines and you don't excel to the unrealistic standards that we are holding you up to, then you cease being French, you cease being American, you cease being British, you cease being Canadian. Now you're just like an African, you're an immigrant, you're unwanted. How dare you? We give you a place, we give you a home, we give you everything. How dare you not live up to our unrealistic standards that half of the people cannot even live up to?
What I find interesting is, like, when I read stories from Africa and when I watch what politicians say, especially in France, about African migrants, when they are unemployed, when they may commit a crime, or when they are considered unsavory, it's the African immigrants. When their children go on to provide a World Cup victory for France, we should only refer to them as France. And we even saw it with that African man who climbed the building to rescue the baby. Do you remember that? We watched him climb that building. He rescued the child, and then they gave him French citizenship. They said, you are now French. So now I'm going, so is he now no longer African? Is that what you're saying? So when he was on the ground, he was African. And then he climbed up, and as soon as he rescued the baby, now he's French. So if he dropped the baby, the African dropped the baby. Like, I don't believe that you need, and here's, like I say, again, with respect, I understand what the ambassador is saying. I'm not joining the attack. And I know, don't get me wrong, I know. There's like, you know, we live in a world where, like, nuance is something that is in short supply. And so you will find, you know, in America, for instance, the alt-right saying, that's what we've been saying. They're not French. And we're saying, it's like, but if Trevor says it, it's not racist. But if we say it's racist, like, yeah, I'll say yeah. You know why? Because I believe context is everything. There are certain things you can say to somebody that, like, when I say to my friends, what's going on, man? And if a white person came and said the same thing, yeah, there's a big difference. When I'm saying they're African, I'm not saying it as a way to exclude them from their Frenchness, but I'm rather using it to include them in my Africanness. I'm saying, I see you, my French brother of African descent. Do you know what I'm saying? That's what I'm trying to say. When somebody else says it the other way, you can use the same line in different ways. People are like, so it's different? Yeah, it's different. It can be different. It's like somebody saying, oh, so if you play with your naked child, that's a problem, but if I do it, I'm a pedophile? Yeah. There's a big difference. There's a huge difference. So I will continue to praise them for being African because I believe that they are of Africa, their parents are from Africa, and they can be French at the same time. And if French people are saying they cannot be both, then I think they have a problem and not me.
Anyway, you tell me what you think, because this is nothing new, particularly not just even in sports, in the world in general. You know, we'll be very keen to celebrate Nigerian immigrants in the UK when they're doing, or the US when they're doing really well. And when one bad thing happens, then we lump up the whole community and say, yeah, look at these immigrants, instead of just pointing out the one person or taking accountability for what happened. Let me know what you think. Comment down below in the comment sections your thoughts. I'll see you again next time.